North London derby doesn't disappoint. Bayern and Newcastle both run it up. Barca's stunning 10 minutes puts them top, and Everton gets their first win. All of that plus 2 victories in Manchester. Serie A is wide open, and we discuss all this and so much more. The full-time roundup starts right now. Welcome to another episode of the Full-Time Roundup. Matt Gesslin here with you alongside Daniel Brackett as always. We are here at Salud in Noda on a Monday evening after another great weekend of matches across Europe. Daniel, great to see you as always and discuss some European football with you. How are you doing today?
It's Monday and I'm already back on the horse with a beer, drinking a nice Czech Pilsner. How about you?
Same here, my friend. Not back on the horse, but drinking a beer as well. Again, great weekend, Daniel. Seems like a great weekend every weekend in European football. We went right from Champions League into European Domestic League. But of course, as always, we start off the show with what are we wearing. You have this lovely kit on here. I have one that will probably piss off some of our listeners, maybe not, but we'll get to that one here in a second.
So this is a Goodwill find. I don't even know. I think it's a Central American, might be a Hispanic team. I'm not really sure, but it was $5 at Goodwill, and I'm a sucker for kits, so it was a must buy.
Can't go wrong for $5. I do have a controversial kit a little bit. Of course, being Americans, we root for the U.S. men's national team, but I do have an El Tri kit on tonight.
Fraud.
I know. Slap me on the wrist. Reason there is a story behind it. I did work for Adidas. Of course, that being a Mexican representative and sponsor, U.S. men's national team being Nike. Was not able to wear a U.S. men's national team on campus, of course, so next best thing is El Tri. But that's neither here nor there. I wear it sometimes. Again, we love kits.
It's a good-looking
kit.
It is
a good-looking kit.
Checks over stripes, I guess you could say.
It is.
For me, at least, personally.
And one of the best, side change before we get into things, the best-selling kit of the World Cup in Qatar that year. So, I'm a man of the people.
Sure. Nice
man
pattern.
Of the people. Yes, nice pattern. But we digress. There are important things to talk about. Daniel, in Premier League, as we always start off in England, we had one of the oldest, most heated, most intense rivalries this weekend, North London Derby. Boy, did that not disappoint. And it came at a really interesting time with first time, I think, in its history that both teams are undefeated heading into that match.
Wow. Matt is our stat guy, and he continues to produce there. So I love this matchup just because two very attack-minded teams, especially with Ange Postecoglou. Usually a Tottenham would kind of sit back here and try to take a point or maybe just hit on the break with Conte or Mourinho, but no, they just went at Arsenal, and Arsenal scored a goal, and Spurs had an answer almost immediately both times, which it's good to see. That means the side has character, shows that the manager is backing them, and they're confident in what they can do. It wasn't – I would say it's not like it wasn't the derby feel where people are just flying into challenges, but pretty soccer was played.
It was. There was still some animosity, right? We saw some conversation between two English teammates in James Maddison and Bukayo Saka post-match. Of course, Saka taking Madison's signature arrow dart celebration and Madison firing back. Of course, all of that was post-game. So, like you said, a little bit more muted on the field. But also, a great match all around. You mentioned Spurs kind of coming out of the gate, really. We've talked about this before, taking after their manager, right? They're really, embracing that Ange Postecoglou vibe and kind of just the way he approaches things, never fight, never back down, always fight, never back down. And they did just that, like you mentioned, going down both times and equalizing both times as well. A mistake from, Jorginho in the second goal that really, James Madison, nice pass to Sonny, who had a brace in this one. But like you said, just, Spurs, we've always talked about Spurs as having Spursy moments.
Yeah.
I think that may be time to put that to bed, although it is early. But we'll see. This looks like a different Spurs side this time around right now.
No, it does. But I will say that Madison looked like he hyperextended his knee. Scans are still out on the verdict of that knee injury. So if Madison's out for an extended period of time, I'm not very bullish on Spurs in the upcoming future. So better hope he's healthy. But I will say that Saka's done that several times. He did the fingers in the ear when he scored against Man U to copy Rashford. So that's an ongoing trend, and that's just showing that Saka is him. And the two people that stood out for me was Son and Saka. Those two guys were the best players on the field, honestly. And it was fun to see them kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, two English teammates, so that'll be interesting to see that dynamic as it continues. Is it just a little bit of back and forth after the match, or is this something that you'll see carry over into a big tournament for England coming up? That, of course, that'll probably be squashed once they get back to camp. But you mentioned those two players, of course. There was also a lot of new players for Spurs in this one, first time in the North London Derby.
True.
They did deliver. They looked good. Again, we always knew that this game was going to be high scoring. Honestly, 2-2 was something that I thought was a little bit lower than I expected, with both teams being very offensive-minded, questionable at the back, although you have to say Spurs looked a little bit sharper at the back than I thought they were going to look.
Yeah, I mean, one of the goals was a tough own goal by Cuti Romero, just trying to lump it and just went off the shin into the goal. So I thought both teams defended fairly well, other than a couple individual mistakes, but we also didn't mention, but David Raya solidifies his number one spot. That one save, that's a never give up mentality. Squares it for, I can't remember, was it Brendan Johnson?
Yep, Brendan Johnson.
And all he has to do is put in the back of the net, and Raya just jumps all the way across the goal to save it out. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. So David Raya seems to lock up that, and Ramsdale's future is in doubt.
Yeah, and you mentioned Brendan Johnson. He did go out with an injury at the end of that match as well. There was another player, Declan Rice, who had a knock as well, picked up a back injury. Doesn't appear to be too serious, but two injuries to keep an eye out for. I would say of the two, Declan Rice a little bit more important to the team than Johnson, but we'll see. And of course, we mentioned and we've talked about him before, Martin Odegaard being in that middle and that engine for that team, but you do want to see Rice come back, especially after Jorginho makes a mistake that cost the Spurs honestly probably 2 points based off that play. They were kind of in control of the match a little bit. You heard Mikel Arteta talk after the match that this team looked a little bit deflated after drawing when they thought they could have won this match. So we'll see what happens there. We did see Spurs, like I said, have a Spursy moment, but they bounced back this year. Arsenal last year falling at the end. Is this another opportunity for Mikel to rally the troops after a hard-fought North London derby, even though they did drop points, or will that be a trend that we see going forward, that a little bit of adversity and this team kind of falters? It'll be an interesting dynamic. It's still early in the season, but just something to look out for.
Every point matters when you got a team like City at the top, so we'll maybe they'll look back at the end of the season and say this is points lost, but any derby to get at least a point out is a success. So I wouldn't look too far into that.
Yeah, and you mentioned dropping points. These two teams now, of course, with the splitting the points there, 4th and 5th respectively. Of course, goal differential has Arsenal ahead has Spurs ahead of Arsenal in that Champions League spot. But Daniel, to me, this and you never count those two teams out, especially with what Arsenal did last year. But 4 points behind City right now for the title. But we do have 3 other teams that are really fighting for that top spot. I know one of your teams is in that mix, and the real question is, do we have a title race on our hands? We have 3 teams at the moment, like I said before, those 2 that we just discussed. Where do we stand on this? Is this a City versus everybody, or are we really looking at something that's more of a balanced top half of the Premier League?
We're gonna see, because as we pivot into the next game, Manchester City, they do scrape by Nottingham Forest with a 2-0 victory, but they got a red card early in the second half. A cool, calm, collected player, probably the most influential player for City the last year and a half, Rodri, gets a red card. He's going to be out for at least 3 matches, if not 5, for the violent conduct. So that's going to be a big hole to fill, and they're already pretty injured with the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, Grealish is out, John Stones is out, just to name a few. And so it's a congested fixture list coming up, and it's going to be games every weekend and midweek. So who's going to fill that spot? Is Mateus Nunes going to just slot in there? But you're going to have to really lean on a Calvin Phillips, who hasn't featured almost at all. And this is the pivotal moment for Calvin. Is he going to live up to that price tag they spent so much for a year and a half ago for Leeds? And he's going to be the key to this. And if they can't replace that Rodri void in the next 3 Prem matches, this is going to be an opportunity for the other 4 teams to kind of catch up ground on City. And this is a perfect opportunity for this is a billboard on every team's going to be walking in knowing that this is the opportunity to catch ground on City, and so we're going to have to see how that goes.
Yeah, and you mentioned filling that void, of course, right? You're never going to fill the void of Rodri.
No.
He's just such a dynamic player. We've mentioned him as arguably the most, and if not the best, center defensive midfielder in the world.
For me, he is.
For me, I just agree with you as well. The fixture list is not easy either, like you mentioned. The head-to-heads against the three big teams
Arsenal.
that we talked about,
Yeah.
Arsenal, Brighton, and then, of course, you have the Manchester Derby against United. That is if he only gets 3 games. We didn't even look if he gets 5. And, you've seen punishments doled out for what he did. If you haven't seen it, a hand to the throat of the player on Forest. So, there is debate of whether or not this is going to be more than a regular 3 games suspension for a red card. So it's an interesting dynamic right now.
Did you see the clip of him doing it? He realized as soon as he touched the guy, he knew he fucked up so badly. He does it, he pulls away, and then just grabs his head like, oh no.
And that may save him. But they made a point of emphasis going for touching the throat or anything like that. So hopefully we'll see. Like you mentioned, this is an opportunity though for some of those other teams to jump up and kind of get of course City being in the lead or ahead already is kind of a tough spot for everybody else, but you also want to hope and understand that some of the other guys, like your Liverpool, who looked pretty good the other day, will continue to do that. So, what were your thoughts on Liverpool? And they won against a tough West Ham, who everyone's been very high on at the start of the season.
Yeah, it was a good win. Kind of like West Ham have had 2 tough games in a row with City and Liverpool, and I was thinking Liverpool's record against Moyes is incredible, so I wasn't too worried. But when they tied up with a Jared Bowen header, it was a little concerning. But we're a second half team, as we showed statistically, and when you have a Darwin Nunez just in great form, Mo Salah in great form, Diaz is in great form, and then you can bring on a Gakpo and a Jota off the bench. That's just kind of over for them. So convincing win here. I will say that we do have the longest unbeaten streak in the Premier League to boast. So we'll see if we can keep this run of form up. I think we do. We do have an interesting schedule list the next 5. Some bad teams, some good teams. So we'll see if we can make some ground up on City. I think we will, just because Klopp's going to be motivating the boys a lot. But I was also, just to give flowers to West Ham, I think Bowen again passed the Anfield test. I thought he looked fantastic. Paqueta looked insane. I haven't really heard about his betting thing, but if he can stay out of trouble with that, then I think West Ham are just going to be just fine.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about West Ham because, real quick, of course, they've lost the last 2 matches after that really fast start. But, of course, the 2 teams were City and Liverpool, two of the best teams in the league, of course, not only at the top of the table right now, but historically. Any concern of David Moyes' squad, or is this kind of where you expected them? Of course, very right out of the gate being at the top of the table was pretty much a surprise for everybody.
Well, I was not very bullish on them until they signed at the last minute, and now Edson Alvarez to James Ward-Prowse, and they kind of slot in ready to go. Kudus is still kind of getting up to speed, but he made a late substitutes appearance, so I'm not really worried about West Ham. It's more about getting points off maybe 5 places and below. Like, they're probably not going to win against the top 4, but anyone else is a winnable game. So they're so deadly on set pieces, and we kept giving them away. So I was scared. They'll always have a chance when you have James Ward taking a free kick or James Ward-Prowse taking a free kick. So I'm not that worried about West Ham right now. Maybe with European football they kind of falter a little bit, but I still think they'll be top 7.
Probably a good place for them. And, of course, you mentioned European football, a team that had a great bounce-back performance after European football is Brighton, another one of those teams that we mentioned in the top 3. It's a little bit of surprise, although the way we've talked about De Zerbi ball and how they've played, I think it was more a surprise that they played so poorly in Europe this midweek. But something new for them, of course. But, boy, did Matoma come off the bench and put his cape on, as I've said with other players, and Jude Bellingham, he put that cape on and a brace off the bench and takes Brighton to a 3-1 win against Bournemouth.
Yeah, well, it's tough to start a match when your keeper just literally gives the ball to the opposition.
Yeah, that was pretty poor.
That was really bad.
That was really poor.
But the funny thing is, Bournemouth just gave a goal right back with that first Matoma goal off a kickoff. they just lose the ball immediately. Billing just doesn't lump it long. They take it. Matoma just kind of skis his way down the line and then goes and scores an easy goal to put them up 2-1. So when you have two bad errors like that, it's pretty easy to kind of come back, and two gifts in that game. But Brian responded well. You could see how frustrated De Zerbi was on Thursday, and I had no doubt that they'd bounce back on this one.
Yeah, like you mentioned, De Zerbi wears his emotions on his sleeve, his heart on his sleeve, and not a huge surprise. And of course, Bournemouth, being one of the teams in the lower half of the table, switching gears to that lower half of the table, that relegation battle. Of course, the middle teams, you're still kind of figuring those teams out, right? Your Crystal Palaces, your Fulhams, they're kind of all going to be fighting for that. Brentford, they're going to be fighting for those middle 7 through 13, 14 positions. But boy, in the bottom half, where there's some bad teams right now in this league, Daniel, not to be withstanding the team that I thought was not as bad as some others, as Sheffield United, who absolutely got blasted by Newcastle. That was hard to watch.
They just gave up. It was bad. And I mean, when you put one shot on goal midweek, I'm sure Eddie Howe was just blasting the strikers in the midfield for that midweek performance. And what did they do? They put 8 past Sheffield, and I haven't seen many 8-0 humblings before, but 8 different goal scorers. That'll let the guys pad their stats a little bit, give the guys some confidence. And where was that first goal? A handball? Maybe, but it doesn't matter when you score 7 more.
Yeah, and of course, I think the town of Sheffield is ready to not see Newcastle come through anymore. Not only did they beat Sheffield 8-0 here on Saturday, the other team in Sheffield Wednesday, was also beaten by Newcastle 8-0. So they have that in common. Of course, not in the same season, but just the rivalry that is Sheffield and Sheffield Wednesday. They can at least console each other on an 8-0 drubbing by Newcastle.
Call it therapy.
Call it therapy, exactly. But 8 different goal scorers. You mentioned that potential handball. I don't think that changes the game, to be honest. But just an absolute drubbing by Newcastle, who looked really good, and also not a bad bench when you can bring off Isak and Tonali and a couple other players late in that game. They didn't even start for Newcastle.
Not only do you rotate and you win by 8, but you get to rest guys for the midweek fixtures and Champions League in the future. So that's never a bad thing for Eddie Howe's men.
And they have a big game against City in the Carabao Cup on Wednesday.
Huge game. So that's kind of I'm sure Howe had his eyes on that, and they didn't look past Sheffield, which is big, because Sheffield's kind of been in against City and Tottenham. They were still in the game pretty late, so kind of surprising that Sheffield just kind of rolled over. But just to pivot to the next game, Everton-Brentford. We've been really down on Everton, and they get a huge result against Brentford.
I mean, they scored 3 goals. I was not expecting.
I've never seen that before.
I was, well, I've seen it, but I was not expecting 3 goals.
Time.
It's been a while, and especially from a Brentford team. Now, this team is very thin right now. They had a lot of injuries. I think there was six players, many of them starters. Of course, we know Ivan Toney's out right now, and so interesting dynamic though at home. You didn't expect a team to show up from a Thomas Frank side like that, and Everton. Sean Dyche, who I heard the most ridiculous stat, as you mentioned earlier, stat guy over here, but hasn't won a game in the Premier League in August or September since 2019, which absolutely blew my mind. It's a brutal stat, but gets off the schneid, and again, a very surprising 3-goal performance for them, and they get a huge deserving win against Brentford. Then they needed it.
Yeah, they did. They could not need it more. And I will say that Brentford have struggled as of late. In the last 5, they have 2 losses, 3 draws, so they've been winless out of the 5. I was thinking this would be a get-right game, but with all the injuries, it's kind of hard for Thomas Frank's men to kind of rally the troops there. I'm not concerned about Brentford, but it was more of this is huge for Everton to get off the board.
Absolutely, and you know where Brentford's going to be, like I mentioned, one of those teams in mid-table. Yeah. So, but a team that absolutely, we mentioned Everton needing a win. Another team that needed a huge win was Manchester United. They got just what they needed, playing Burnley, who were, I think, 18th or 19th, depending on goal differential. So at the bottom of the table. Still didn't look very convincing to me, Daniel, but they got the 1-0 win, and that's kind of what Erik ten Hag needs to end a really poor week, if you ask me.
I don't know if United fans are are happy with this win, but a W is a W, as you say, and that goal taken by Bruno Fernandes on the first-time volley was a thing of beauty, and some confidence to kind of show some results there and maybe calm the dressing room a bit.
Calm the fans.
Calm the fans, yeah. So no boo boys after this one, and boy did Burnley need a result too, and they didn't get it. So right now it's Luton, Sheffield, Burnley in the bottom three. Are these the three that are going to go right back down?
Man, I mentioned earlier on I thought Burnley had a chance. I think we both agreed Luton should pack their bag. They just got their first point. There was discussion of, could this Luton team be worse than Derby County that got 11 points? You never want to hear that. 11 points in a season is only painful for just everybody involved. But to answer your question, I think those three teams do go down. This is arguably the weakest promotions set of teams that I've seen in a long time. I touched on it and feel this way strongly that Premier League this year is not as good top to bottom. A lot of in the past it's always been competitive. You never know who you're going to go against, and every team can beat every team in the Prem. But this year you feel like the cream is coming to the crop, and there is going to be that big gap between 7th and 18th, and then the bottom three will be the bottom three for pretty much the whole season.
And speaking on Luton, they did get their first point, I believe,
First point, yep.
Against Wolves. An early red card from Bellegarde helped their causes. Pretty solid penalty, but a draw is a draw, and that was pretty big for Luton being at home. Finally, give the fans something to cheer about, and
surprisingly, a 1-1 draw. I thought this game could have played for the entire season and no team would have scored.
That is true.
1-1, and they get their big point that they needed to get off, and maybe that frees them up a little bit to play. That more direct style play that they played in the championship that got them promoted. We'll see.
And that Pedro Neto's celebration was one of the funnier things. He had 8 celebrations in that one. It looked like he hasn't scored a goal in forever, and he just had to get all the cellies out at once. So
he may be taking them. He say, maybe this is my one goal. Let me make them all. And
it was
get them all
it was
in.
really funny to watch, and there's a lot of good memes out there. But now moving on, I know this is a sore subject for you. I do have some stats for you, but I'll let you.
You're pulling to me?
Yeah,
You're pulling some stats
I will.
On me?
I will pull some stats because I've been enjoying this. I'm not gonna lie, but I'll let you get on your soapbox first, and then I'll pull up the stats.
So of course, my friend Daniel here is talking about Chelsea. Another loss to Aston Villa at home. 1-0 loss. An Ollie Watkins goal that gives Villa the 3 points. I said 0-1, so yes, we haven't scored again. That's 3 games in a row in the Premier League that we haven't scored now. The last time we scored was against Luton, so that's pretty concerning. I mentioned this before, and I've seen it on Twitter, and the sky is falling, and all of the Chelsea fans are ready to kind of change things up, and Poch has got to go, and all these things. It's a project, folks. I hate to be that person and kind of temper expectations, and of course I want to score goals. I want to win at the Bridge. I want to win on the road. Chelsea's supposed to be that team that fights for the top 4 and fights for titles, but that's not who we are right now. And I think everyone needs to take a step back. 14th place, of course, is not where we want to be, but it's a long season. I did say that we're going to finish 6th. I think there's still an opportunity and some hope for that, especially we've seen kind of teams rotating and having 4 games in a 3-week span with European football, and that's going to take a toll on some of those teams as well.
Yeah.
So everyone needs to calm the brakes, calm down. We looked okay. We had, again, more domination, more possession. That red card completely changes the game. And then, of course, when you give up a counter-attacking goal, that Ollie Watkins, a great finish. A little unlucky from Levi Colwill, who blocked the first one, and then Ollie gets that rebound and off the deflection and puts it between Robert Sanchez's legs and ends the game.
You should have saved that.
Should have saved it, 100%. But it's tough. I cry at night. I cry to sleep. But I think we'll be okay in the end. And like I said to you before, Daniel, we finished 8th or 9th. For me, that's kind of where I expect this team to be.
I have gone mute before when Liverpool was struggling, and I was not as nice to Matt after this one. He was a little sensitive, but it's okay. It's okay. So just a couple stats here.
In the heat of the moment.
And just a couple stats here. 0 goals in the last 3 games, 5 points in 6 matches. You have Arsenal, Brentford, Spurs, City, Newcastle, Brighton, and Man U next. That is a brutal schedule. Not only Nico Jackson misses the next game off suspension, Malo Gusto out for 3 matches with his red card. That is not good. And another horrible, horrible stat. Only 2 wins since Potter was fired.
Yeah, it's dire. I get it.
And $1 billion spent.
It's dire. And Poach came out today and you know, said it's time for the kids to grow up. But at the same time, you know, you mentioned the $1 billion that have been spent. A lot of those players, and this is just fact, folks, I'm not trying to make excuses for my squad, are hurt. You know, Reece James on the bench. Ben Chilwell hasn't been playing. Nkunku hurt. You know, you could go down the list. A lot of the starters that were supposed to be starters for this team were hurt or are hurt. So we'll see what happens. Again, it's dire, and it's everyone wants, you know, the world to end, and of course Chelsea being what we are, and we expect to win every game. But the reality is we could go through that stretch and maybe pick up 4 points, and you know, that's a reality. That's a really tough schedule, and I was hoping we'd be in a better place, or at least looking like we were going to be progressing and kind of changing and making the corner as we went into this tough schedule. I did look at this a lot earlier in the season and said, shit, you know, this is really scary if this is where we are going into this stretch. And we'll see. You know, Poach is coaching for his job, and especially the latter half. I think the first couple of games, if we lose to Arsenal or we lose to City, I think that's okay. But if we don't play well or don't score some goals against Brentford or Newcastle, I think you're starting to question, especially if that's about week 10 or week 11 of the season, and we're still in 14th place with 5 points or you know, maybe 7 points or whatever. Then you start to really question where this goes.
And the last thing I'll say on this matter before we move on to other leagues is you pay Pochettino the big bucks for a reason, and you spend $1 billion. Yes, you do have injuries, but that's no excuse. Like, a manager has to just deal with the situation and still get results. And we've seen other fantastic managers do it, and he is not. So he better figure it out, and he better figure it out soon, or Chelsea's going to be in big trouble. Big trouble.
Can't disagree with you. I mean, that is what it is. And the one thing I want to say, though, is like I said, everyone's saying the sky is falling, but what manager are you going to give 5 games and turn it around? No manager is going to be able to come. You could give Pep or Klopp the same squad, and the fans would be complaining to ride them out of town after 5 games too. You know, that's where Chelsea is. And it's a little bit. I don't know, a little overboard, on my opinion. You know, give the man some time. Again, week 11, week 12, and we're still in the same spot. Different story, but you know, a little bit of time won't hurt.
They need to remember where they were before Abramovich, and maybe that'll help them feel a little bit better. But now rotating to a different league, the Bundesliga. We had some great matches. Is there a title race?
I hope so.
Me too.
It's been 11 seasons in a row of Bayern Munich winning the league. They absolutely dismantled Bochum, which isn't too surprising. 7-0. Harry Kane with a hat trick in this one.
And 2 assists too.
And 2 assists. Can't really say much more. But Daniel, at what point does this become bad for the Bundesliga? One of these other teams, of course, we know that Bayern spends more than all the teams almost combined in the Bundesliga, but there has to be someone that can step in and kind of give them a run and end this reign of dominance, right?
And I think the team or the teams that could give them a reign, what we're about to talk about, one is Leverkusen, and they had a convincing win against Heidenheim. We've seen other big teams like Dortmund kind of give up points to Heidenheim, and Leverkusen were in full go mode the entire time, a convincing 4-0 or 4-1 win, excuse me. They did tie it up for a brief moment, but when you have Victor Boniface or Boniface, excuse me, and Wirtz and Frimpong and all the other players that they very good players that they have, it was always going to be Leverkusen today, and they had a convincing win. Now, not much to say. It is a newly promoted side, so we can go ahead and kind of move on here. But Leipzig actually had a kind of a tricky game against Magdeburg. They gave Bayern a really good run for their money a couple weeks, I think 2 weeks ago, and Leipzig just squeaked by with a late Timo Werner goal, and boy, did he need that.
He needed that. Surprising to see him on the score sheet. A great finish, to be honest. If you saw that goal from that angle, was unbelievable. Of course, played through by Xavi Simons. Great ball through, perfectly weighted. gets around the keeper, and like you said, an impossible angle off the post and in. They needed that win to keep pace. It's you mentioned Mönchengladbach, who've given Bayern Munich a challenge. They've also given Leipzig a challenge at home. It's a tough place to go play. Fourth game, 4 seasons in a row with going to Gladbach and not getting a result for Leipzig. So off the schneid here, get that that monkey off their back and keep pace. They're currently sitting third behind Leverkusen, 1 point behind, and you got a lot of teams in that 2 or 3 point window behind Bayern. We've always seen Bayern kind of take a jump and win the league by 15, 20 points. The league's done by Christmas. You hope, like I said, for the league's sake, that this is a close race all the way through. You look at a team like Borussia Dortmund, who had the chance. They had it on their foot last year. Blow it at the end. And heartbreaking, and currently sit sixth. They get a much-needed win, and Terzic makes some changes after the sixth. But we're still talking about changes. And 6 changes. Yeah. But we're still talking about him because you want there to be some type of energy, some type of competition, some type of fight for this Bundesliga challenge or title. Will we get it? That's really the question. And you have some outlier teams that are surprising as Union Berlin did last year, but are those guys going to really stay all the way through it and give Bayern a fight? We'll have to just wait and see. But that's kind of, for me, that's the biggest story in Germany is Bayern going to continue to get it done?
I sure hope not, but it's not looking too good. It seems like Tuchel ball has clicked in the last 2 weeks. I'd say they put 4 past United. They scored, what was it, 7?
Mm-hmm.
7 against Bochum, and it is Bochum, but it seems like they were very stagnant before.
A Bochum team, by the way, that tied Dortmund earlier this year. So
I know. I'm sorry, Jack, for these stats. I know that hurts, man, but. Yeah, they got it done, and it was always going to be Bayern after that first early goal by Choupo-Moting. And you mentioned some outliers.
Is there anyone, though, that's going to challenge you real quick before we and you mentioned some outliers. I mentioned them, of course, Stuttgart being one of those with Guirassy, who's just
on fire.
10 goals already. I think the last year the leader in the Bundesliga was 16 goals. So he's already at 10 in 5 games. I mean, you mentioned them. There's Hoffenheim. Will they kind of keep that up? I don't know. But, is there anyone? I mean, besides we mentioned a couple of those teams, but who give me your winner in the Bundesliga right now.
It's really key to just injuries at inopportune times, but I really do believe this Leipzig team and Leverkusen can go almost the distance. I think that Bayern, with just their depth and everything, will end up pushing through for another Bundesliga title. But I think Leverkusen and Leipzig are really going to give a run for their money. They both have depth, and they both look fantastic. Xabi Alonso has been linked to the Real Madrid job as a successor, so I think he's going to be very keen on really challenging this year and showing his tactical fervor, and can he keep replicating these performances, especially with Europa League and all. Will he go deep in the Europa League? That's another big question. If he's the man to take over a Real Madrid side, he still is like low 40s, so he is a younger manager. And then Marco Rose with Leipzig, he failed pretty badly at Dortmund, but has kind of had a re-enlightenment, I guess you could say, with Leipzig, and they have a lot of depth off the bench too. So I think the top 3 is kind of almost set in stone at this point. It's who's going to go for that 4th spot, and hopefully to God, just to make it interesting, they challenge Bayern all the way through.
Well, I'll take that as I didn't hear an answer, but that's okay.
Bayern
is going to win it. Yeah. Fair enough. I still feel confident in my pick from earlier that Leipzig gets it done, but we'll see. You mentioned European football. You also mentioned Xabi Alonso and potentially going to Real Madrid. Of course, going into La Liga, Real Madrid, a disappointing loss this past week in the Madrid derby. Was not expecting that, to be honest, but also kind of was, as I picked Atletico Madrid to win the league, and they needed this win, and boy, Madrid looked slow and old, and Jude Bellingham forgot his cape for once, which we've talked about, and he couldn't do it all season long. Any key takeaways from this match, and of course one of the biggest derbies in La Liga, if not the biggest one?
Well, last week Atletico dropped points. Can't remember
surprisingly.
I can't remember who they lost to, but it was a rather surprising loss, and then they tie off a heartbreaker in Rome against Lazio, and so they had a big bounce back win today. or yesterday, excuse me, against Madrid, and they looked firing on all cylinders. That Real Madrid bench looked pretty light. Pretty light. Vinicius Jr. is back, and he tweeted today that he is back, so that'll be big for the midweek matchup against Las Palmas. But Modric, Cruz did score the goal, but they showed their age, and you need these young kids to step up I can't say it. You got it. Tsunami?
Oh,
Chumani, Camavinga, Rodrigo, and they'd even start a striker with Joselu because he needs a break too. So having no backup striker is definitely. Not only did you lose Benzema, but you only signed one guy, and then you sell like an Asensio and I'm trying to remember Borja. No, not Borja Mayoral, but they sold the other striker who was the backup. Can't remember his name for the life of me right now, but they're looking light, and that's why I did pick Barca to win. And I think Madrid's going to struggle if they go deep in the Champions League with just the whole depth aspect with old guys and young guys kind of trying to mix.
Yeah, and we saw, again, against the good teams, this is going to be a real tough challenge for them with, of course, Militao out in the back and Courtois hurt. You mentioned the front line being weak as well. So, against mid-table teams, I think you're going to see maybe they squeak some points out. They get those wins, and if Jude puts his cape on and can kind of save them, of course, like I mentioned before, he scored 90th minute winners against really mid-table teams, and you go up against a big squad, and they haven't even played El Clasico yet.
Yeah.
So this is concerning for me from a Madrid standpoint. Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid, where are they going to go? What does that look like? You mentioned Europe as well. So how is that depth going to play for them? And
they barely scraped by against Union.
They really did, so. Yeah. So it's an interesting time. And on the flip side, of course, you mentioned Atletico having some disappointment, but boy did Morata and Griezmann shine. Morata with a brace, and Griezmann, like I've mentioned before, has just continued his form from Qatar, to be honest, and just really stepped up and driven this team. I think Atletico Madrid goes as Antoine Griezmann goes. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And Griezmann is one of those footballers who is loving his game. There's not many more enjoyable players to watch. And it's a shame what happened at Barca and he didn't work out. But since he got back to Atletico, he's been playing some of his best football. There's something about him and Simeone and how they kind of mesh as a manager and player. It's something that João Felix couldn't figure out. And I think they're similar players. So I was very confused when João Felix just kind of fell out with Simeone. But definitely big 3 points for Atletico to kind of cement themselves in the top three. And we'll see how the matches go. It's only week 5, so a lot of matches left.
Yeah, and of course you mentioned João Felix in Barcelona. They squeeze out a win against Celta Vigo, which was surprising. They were down 2-0. I think you even texted me at one point that they lost. And so all of a sudden I look at the scoreline. It's 3-2 Barcelona. Crazy last minute, 10 minutes there where they get 3 goals to win that game. Your super team and your team that you think is going to win La Liga, what were your takeaways from a really strange but important 3 points that they come away with?
I was a little worried about this match just because Celta Vigo are no slouch. You have a great manager, and for 80 minutes, Xavi was outcoached. And I don't know if you watched the game, but Xavi changed the formation 3 times. He was tinkering. He made all 5 substitutions within 60 minutes, which is kind of pretty bold to do. And Celta got that second goal, and I was on the treadmill watching it, and I just kind of turned it off after the second goal. I was like, oh, this game's done. And I looked back, and because you texted me, and you're like, wow, Barcelona with 3 goals, and didn't see that coming. But it's very nice to see that they had that no quit attitude. And I mean, that first Lewandowski goal, just to slightly caress the ball over the keeper, bar down into the net, and then they respond, they keep going. I mean, absolute collapse by Celta, and I'm sure Rafa Benitez is very upset with the squad. Luca De La Torre had a nice assist, and he looked really good against a big team, which is good for the national team. But for my pick at least, it's good to see that Barca are in winning ways, and I think they are sitting top of the
They
Liga.
are, yeah. And any concern with, of course, Frankie de Jong picks up an ankle injury. Looks like he's going to be out for a month and may even miss El Clasico. Any concern there, not only with domestically, but your prediction of a super squad that could go all the way in Champions League? Any concern with that?
I think signing Gundogan, and he's been immense since so far, and Oriol Romeu has kind of fit right in. So I wouldn't say I'm that worried. They're definitely going to have to call on a Fermin Torres or a Pablo Torre, or Pablo Torre might have left actually, but they're going to have to rely on more youth, maybe slide Gavi back or tweak the formation a little bit. So it's going to be more coaching and how Xavi sets up his team to win. Maybe you play like a 5-2-3 or something of that nature, just to kind of help with the injuries to Pedri and Frankie. Hopefully Pedri comes back
Pedri's
sooner.
out, but may come back between us. He's
Yeah,
out. Yeah,
so
exactly,
maybe
yeah.
it'll be kind of a like for like with Frankie out, Pedri in. So I'm not too worried, because when you have João Felix, Lewandowski, Rafinha, you have some star-studded talent up there, and so I'm not too worried. Plus Lamal, can't forget about Lamal. But I'm not too worried. They have a pretty easy fixture midweek, and so I think El Clasico in a couple weeks will be a big indication of how this La Liga title is going to go.
Totally agree with you, and I think that's going to be, that depth that you've talked about over and over again, and really kind of, again, similar with Madrid. They're going to kind of take advantage of those mid to lower table teams in La Liga. Can they get over the hump with some of those bigger matchups going on? And a surprising big matchup that they may end up facing is Girona, still that surprise team that's currently in second place right now. But let's be honest, they're probably not going to finish in second.
No, they're a super team.
They're a super team. But they may finish in that fourth position, although there is a pretty big battle right now for fourth. Anyone stand out to you that's going to finish? Again, let's just assume the top three are the big three.
Yeah.
Anyone in that fourth position that may surprise you? We've mentioned how good Real Sociedad have been over the past years. I, of course, had Real Betis, and they had a stinking 1-1 performance. Who's your fourth place team in La Liga as we sit here on September 25th?
I took Bilbao, and I'm going to stay with that pick, just because the Williams brothers. Williams is out, but they just keep winning, and I think Real Sociedad and Girona are going to sit right there, so they're going to challenge them all the way through, but I do think Bilbao is going to be able to kind of flex their muscles and kind of sit in that fourth position.
And that's pretty fair, and it feels like that's kind of where, again, very early in all the leagues, La Liga is starting to kind of take shape a little bit, similar to what the Premier League is going to take shape. One league that Daniel is kind of all over the place right now, Serie A. Anyone want to take charge of this league and kind of assert themselves? Of course, AC Milan dominating in the Derby, Inter Milan dominating in the Derby, and they currently sit atop the table, but it feels like, this is just scrappy football. Inter scraping out a win, and same with AC this past week with Rafael Leao winner. Where do we sit with Serie A right now?
I mean, Inter's unbeaten. You would hope that their win against bottom Empoli would be more convincing, but hey, a W is a W here, so they keep winning. I think the next Milan derby is going to be a big indicator. I did read a stat that Inter just owns AC Milan with Pioli in charge, which is not.
It's in their head now, right?
It is,
and
it's not exactly ideal for my AC Milan pick to win the league, but we'll see. I think it really depends on the. We talked about 2-horse, 3-horse races here, and I think it's going to be really depending on the matches against, say, a Napoli, even a Lecce, which is pretty absurd. They're basically the Girona of the Serie A. They're just punching above their weight.
Do you know anyone on that team, by the way?
I don't.
I personally
took
don't.
a look, and I follow soccer pretty religiously, and I couldn't name a single person. I did do some deep digging on Lecce's manager, Roberto Diaverses. He is 48 years old. He came to Lecce this summer, completely transformed the squad. He was with Sampdoria before they got relegated. When he left Sampdoria, they did get relegated. So maybe that's an indication of how good of a manager he was before. And so they're going to be interesting. I don't think they'll keep it up. But Napoli continues to struggle with the draw. Osimhen missed a PK, came off, was very pissed, threw a temper tantrum. He's kind of walked back his behavior. After that, Kvaratskhelia doesn't look like the same player he was, which is just, I said Rafa Leao is the best player in the Serie A. I meant it. And let's see here. Juve kind of dropped points this week, and
surprisingly a big drop, by the way. 4-2 wasn't. It's not a small
convincing.
loss. So.
Yeah. So I mean, they don't have European football with all their accounting mishaps and whatnot. So,
mishaps in air quotes.
yeah. Uh, they pulled too many levers like Barca, but didn't get caught, I guess. And then Atalanta, I mean, they keep chugging along. Fiorentina keeps chugging along. So maybe those are the two teams that are going to continue to challenge. But they also have European football, and do they have the depth to compete? I like the managers. I like the teams. I think it's a Milan race here, and whoever gets third, fourth, and fifth, I wouldn't bet on it.
Feels that way, and you mentioned third or fourth is still up in the air. Don't count out of Roma. Of course, Romelu Lukaku scores again for that team, and they did draw. They have some players though.
They do.
You know, careful for Jose Mourinho. You never count him out. But I do feel like you said it's a Milan race for the title. So
Lukaku 4-4 too.
Yeah, exactly.
Back in style.
We'll keep an eye on that. Another team we want to keep an eye on is, especially now with their star player being hurt in La Classique, is PSG beating Marseille 4-0 this weekend. Of course, like I mentioned, Mbappe does get hurt. PSG currently sitting third. Daniel, is this, with that injury in play, does this open league up, or is it still PSG all the way? We don't know the extent of the injury.
I was checking the injury report for their next match, and he wasn't listed, so I don't know if that's just FootMob not. I don't know if it was a precautionary or if it was just FootMob not kind of reporting it yet. I did a little research into it, but I didn't find much. So it seems like they're kind of keeping it in house when it comes to PSG and the extent of that injury. But Goncalo Ramos kind of opened his bank account there at PSG with 2 goals, and so that's going to help when you have Muani, Ramos. Ousmane Dembele finally got his first assist, so I'm not exactly worried. And they haven't even really played Itatike, and I think he'll play a role at some point, so I'm not worried. I mean, Marseille just lost their manager, and Lyon look awful. Lens, who kind of challenged, don't look as good, so I'm not really worried about Ligue 1 at all.
It still feels that way to me, and like you said, the depth is still superior to everybody else, and this could have been just a precautionary tale with 4-1 or 4-0, excuse me. So we'll see what happens. Of course,
they scored 3 goals unanswered after he left,
yeah,
so
exactly.
I think they'll be okay.
It is still a concern, but you never know, and if of course he plays next match, everything will be not for naught. They're in third. But two teams that are atop their respective table, or at the top of the table, in Eredivisie is PSV and then AZ, who've seemingly come out of nowhere the last 2 seasons. Any thoughts on either of those 2 teams? There is a big story coming out of the Eredivisie that we'll get to here in a second, but thoughts on any of those 2 teams? PSV, of course, have been up top all season and last year as well.
Yeah, well, Feyenoord won the league last year.
Yeah. Second place for PSV last year.
PSV kind of got thumped midweek against Arsenal, responded with a nice, easy 4-0 win. So Pepe got off the mark. Tillman overslept, so was in the matchday squad. That's never good if you're a U.S. national team supporter. But Dest had a pretty good bounce-back performance.
Couldn't have been much worse, to be honest. So.
No, you love to see that, though. And AZ Alkmaar looks good. They choked away really badly. They were up 3-0 and lost 4-3. Midweek, so they got off the mark and had a convincing 3-0 win. So we'll see. But the big match of the Eredivisie was big story was Feyenoord, Ajax. Feyenoord just absolutely drubbed them. You're wearing the Mexican kit. Santiago Jimenez had 2 goals and assists in the first half before the match was called off.
Let's just point that out. The match was called in the first half because the match was abandoned. This is, Daniel, I mean, this is not the first time we've seen this.
Especially in the Dutch league.
Exactly.
It's bad.
And flares and riot police and
bottles being thrown.
I mean, this is an absolutely horrendous look for Ajax. I mean, currently, 11th, I think, in the league, or worse now after that. I mean, this is really ugly stuff. I mean, the fans became unhinged, like I said. They fired the sporting director. The coach is probably on the way out soon as well.
If not already.
We haven't checked it today. But this was just really ugly stuff, Daniel.
And that right back had a really tough day. Only 20 years old and kind of got absolutely bodied by the brother of Urian Timber. I can't remember I think it was Quentin Timber, and just bodied and then set up Santiago Jimenez, and he was responsible for the second goal. Got hooked, and then soon, thank God for his sake, the match was suspended. They are going to resume play on Wednesday, but Ajax are in deep trouble here, and they might not even get Champions League football, which could be catastrophic for their finances in the near coming future. So you hate to see that, but to kind of transition into the Portuguese league, Sporting Lisbon and and Porto sit top with Benfica right behind them. I still think Benfica is going to win just due to the losses that Porto have taken in the summer. Sporting Lisbon will probably have a few players lost in January, so I still think Benfica will win. I don't think it'll be as comfortable as it was last year, but I do think they'll still win.
Yeah, and you mentioned both teams, Porto and Benfica playing Champions League, so they have those as well. Two perennial teams that pretty much always dominate the Portuguese league, and of course Sporting right there as well. So an interesting dynamic there. We'll see what happens. But Daniel, I'm low on beer. I know you're low on beer. We're gonna go grab another beer real quick. When we come back, of course, we'll get right into our best players, best 11s, player of the weeks. Please, in the meantime, don't forget. Please follow us on X at Full-Time Roundup to be part of the conversation. Additionally, please download, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. And Daniel, I'm going to meet you at the bar, and we'll be right back. And welcome back. Daniel, I refreshed my beer, Mexican lager. Cheers to you. What did you get? Same thing?
Same thing, Czech Pilsner.
Something light. Something light. Well, now we dive into two of our favorite segments, I would say. As much as I love talking about the broader look at the teams, we're diving into players here, Daniel. And folks, this is where we love to hear from you guys on Twitter. Again, Full-Time Roundup. You can follow us, or X, however we're calling it these days. Our best 11s of the week, Daniel. We, of course, just to reiterate, we go 3-4-3 is our formation.
Yep.
Take us through your goalie and defender. Of course, we picked these together, but take us through the first two positions.
So I'm gonna, for the goalie, we picked Trubin, the Benfica goalkeeper. He saved a penalty, which was crucial in their win this week, and he faced 2.43 expected goals.
My favorite stat, by the way.
And only conceded one, so that's a pretty good damn day when you think about it. And for defenders, we got Kieran Trippier, a hat trick of assists against their rout against Sheffield, so that was always a no-brainer. We have João Cancelo, 1 goal, 1 assist, was instrumental in the comeback against Celta Vigo for Barcelona. And then third, James Tarkowski. Never thought I'd have an Everton defender.
Maybe our last time having an Everton defender.
Definitely the first and the last, but he had a goal and an assist for Everton, which was crucial for their 3-point Saturday. So we're gonna go with Tarkowski as the third defender.
We did, and again, like you said, first and last time potentially for an Everton defender, especially if we're looking at goals and assists. Moving into the midfield, though, we had Palacios for Bayer Leverkusen, had 2 assists in their game.
Instrumental,
absolutely. Savio, who had a goal and an assist in their game.
For Girona,
you're just so high on Girona, it's unbelievable.
And 19 years old, Brazilian. He's on loan from Troyes, the city kind of affiliate group here, and he's just hit the ground running. So I just wanted to shout him out real quick.
Fantastic young talent. Another young talent in La Liga. We've talked about Bundesliga young talent, La Liga full of talent as well. Next midfielder, James Madison, 2 assists in North London Derby, like we talked about earlier. Get 2 assists in the North London Derby. You're on my list for me.
Absolutely.
And Bruno Guimaraes, which is our last one, who had a goal, 1 goal, 1 assist. It feels a little light for a team that had 8 points, but or 8 goals, but again, 8 different goal scorers was hard to pick one, but he really stood out, was the cog in the midfield and really dominated that team.
And they signed him to a long-term deal to kind of tie him down for the Toon Army. They know that the top 5 teams in the world are kind of sniffing away around there to sign him, so they wanted to tie him down to a long-term contract after his recent performances.
Do you blame him?
No.
Up front, you mentioned Jimenez for Feyenoord, 2 goals and an assist before that game was just, abandoned. Who knows what that could have ended up
And on Wednesday, he could have even more.
So pay attention to that game. So we'll see what happens there. Of course, Robert Lewandowski, 2 goals, late goals, but fantastic finishes. And then to round it out, another guy that we've talked about in La Liga, Alvaro Morata, 2 goals in that game in their win against Real Madrid. So all in all, Daniel, for me, pretty strong 11
Very strong.
for what we had. Of course, player of the week for me, you mentioned him earlier, Harry Kane, 3 goals, 2 assists. Seemed a little easy for against Bochum, but you take those stats and put them on the list every day of the week.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for me, it's Guirassy for Stuttgart. He had 2 goals and an assist.
gorgeous second finish, by the way.
I mean, he kind of looks like Giroud in my opinion, where his build-up play, and he can really play off like anyone. They kind of lump it to him as a kind of play off of him as a striker, and he has 10 goals and 1 assist and 5 or 6 Bundesliga appearances, which is just nuts numbers. Can he keep it up? We're going to see, but I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how he progresses, and it seems like he's not going to be on Stuttgart for very long.
Young player of the week for you?
I have Saka. So, I mean, it feels like he's not that young because he's just
been playing for so long.
He's been killing it, but he had a goal. I mean, you could arguably say that first goal, that own goal against Cuti Romero, he set that up. He was the one who shot the ball. So I'm going to give him 2 goals here, even though the stats speak differently. But how about you?
I'll go with the player that we've talked about. I feel like at length and at nausea in this pod is.
What are you going to do?
You can't. He is what it is. Victor Boniface, 2 goals in their game, in their 4-1 win. So, can't really rule it out. And those are our players of the week. And again, we'd love to hear your thoughts on those. Now, this is Daniel's time to shine. Again, I've talked about how I stay out of this one. That, of course, is Daniel's best bets for the week. Daniel, take us home. Give the people what they want to hear and how they can make some money this week betting on the games.
So first, we're gonna recap last week. And I'm gonna give you a story first. So I my bookie actually had to take off soccer because I was absolutely bankrupting this poor guy. So that just shows to the listeners. You should probably listen to what I'm putting down here. So we went.
Except for me, I can't.
Except for you. But we went 3-2 on best bets. I added a new mortal lock, which is we risk to win 3 units, and the Stuttgart over cash, and then the parlay cash as well plus 2 units. If you listen to the pod, I kind of gave you a bonus best bet here, so we'll go over those. So Leipzig versus Magdeburg. Couldn't be more wrong on that game. So hey, we're gonna take the L. Only 1 goal scored. That was a surprising game for me. I thought they'd kind of steamroll against Magdeburg, but hey, they gave them a good game. So what can you do? Spurs Arsenal over 3.5, exclusively on the pod. Easy cash with 2-2. Leverkusen Heidenheim. This was such an easy play. 4-1 easy victory. Monaco Nice over 3 loss, but hey. When Balogun misses 2 penalties, there's not much you can do here. So with those 2 penalties, we would have had a push. But, hey, I'm not going to hold against Balo as a U.S. national team player.
Also, ball don't lie on the first one. Just going to point that out.
Ball doesn't lie. But, hey, I need more convincing penalties from you, Balo. So we're not going to hold that against you. And then Villa plus a half. I did say fuck Chelsea, and I meant it. Villa was always going to win, and the red card definitely helped with this one. So now we have next week's picks, and so there's a lot of midweek action. So some of these are midweek, some of these are not. So I'm gonna say the mortal lock. You risk to win 3 units is over 3.5 at even odds. Spurs versus Liverpool. This game could be 7. This game could be insane. So that is just hammer that. And then the parlay of the week is Barcelona moneyline against Mallorca, Madrid versus Las Palmas, Leverkusen versus Mainz. Mainz have been awful. City versus Wolves, PSG versus Clermont. So that is the parlay. That is 4-1, around 4-1. So I would take that before the line moves. I would take all of these before the line moves. And for the best bets, we're going to go back to the well with Stuttgart. Stuttgart versus Cologne over 3. I love betting Leverkusen. I will probably not stop betting Leverkusen overs because I don't think there hasn't. I'm not going to say that. But Leverkusen versus Mainz over 3, Monaco versus Marseille over 3, and Bayern versus Leipzig over 3.5. This game, I think it's gonna have with all that attacking power on both sides. Both defenses are somewhat suspect, so I think this could be a thriller here.
I mean, folks. The record speaks for itself. 13-7-1, absolutely phenomenal. Gave you the bets of the week. If you don't bet them, it's your own fault. Of course, there'll be others that he may mention, and we'll share those with you guys. But
I bankrupted my bookie, guys. So
I kind of question the bookie now at that point, but that's okay. But you heard them here first. Take those bets, take them to the bank. Of course, we love listening, hearing from you guys. Again, you can follow us at Full-Time Roundup on X. Please feel free to go ahead and download, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll always be listening and kind of working out and talking with you guys. But we'll see you guys in the next week.
Thank you, and also give us a follow too. So at Life of Gesselin and CLTFC Liverpool are the 2 handles. So go ahead and give us a follow too and interact with us as much as you want. Take care, guys, and thank you for listening.